The eyes are 77, the nose up 44.
A revolution in marriage law is sweeping through the world's parliaments.
Unlock the doors. Unlock the doors.
At last count, 15 countries now allow same-sex couples to marry, including our neighbour New Zealand. But Australia is yet to share the love.
Gay, straight, black or white, marriage is a civil right. Gay, straight, black or white.
Opponents of gay marriage argue that it's harmful for children to have parents of the same sex.
Two mothers or two fathers can't raise a child properly. Who takes the boy to football? Who tells him what's right from wrong?
As debate intensifies, to what extent can science help to resolve it?
Single mothers and same-sex parents can get quite anxious where people are going around saying you're deficit because your child doesn't have a father figure.
Meanwhile, the number of children with same-sex parents continues to rise. So how many kids are we talking about? Well, based on the last census, the best estimate is around 6,000. And that's more than double from just 10 years ago.
It's the first time in history that gay people can expect to have children and families. And as a result, we have what I'd like to call a gayby boom.
It doesn't matter to 2-year-old Matty that her generation is part of the gayby boom. Her parents TANDIWE and NICOLE laugh when I ask how they describe themselves.
Mums.
Yeah,
mums.
Mum 1, Mum 2.
Yeah, yeah, no, that implies some level of banana-ness.
Well, how does that work?
Well, we're both just mum.
Yeah.
When she needs to differentiate, or when we need to differentiate, it's mum Nick and mum T.
They married in the UK 6 years ago, but by moving here, their marriage isn't recognised under Australian law.
So theoretically, we're a de facto couple here. You know, I describe her as my wife. We're married. Finally let us through the gate.
I think having a child is like the great normaliser. You know, I think it makes it easier for all sorts of people to understand you as a family unit.
That's the focus for social scientist Dr. Jennifer Power. She researches the well-being of families parented by same-sex couples.
Often I think people who aren't familiar with gay people and gay families have this image of Mardi Gras. They don't think of gay couples eating their cornflakes in the morning and heading off to work and those kind of normal processes of everyday life.
Since 2008, her 6-year longitudinal study has been collecting data with online surveys and interviews, starting with a sample of 500 people.
Well, it's probably the biggest sample size of that population anywhere. In some ways, the most interesting finding is that we didn't find a lot, if that makes sense. So really, these families are just ordinary families.
But a key argument from groups who oppose same-sex marriage is that children need both a mother and a father.
There's no studies, to my knowledge, which suggest that children who have grown up without both of their biological parents are any worse off than any other kids.
Denominational leaders on marriage.
We have a host of social science research which shows that children do best with the biological, married mother and father.
So I think with that, perhaps we will pray, eh?
Jim Wallace heads the Australian Christian Lobby, a political pressure group operating in state and federal parliaments. He cites research from the US in his campaign to restrict the right to marry to heterosexuals.
You've got Lerner and Haggai, for instance. You've got Professor Amato, and these have shown, without any doubt at all, that children who in a married family with their biological parents perform best across a range of performance indicators.
These are papers by the researchers that Jim refers to. Nagai and Lerner is published by an organisation that advocates for traditional marriage, not an objective scientific journal. The other, by Amato, actually argues the opposite of what Jim does, that overwhelmingly studies show that children of same-sex parents are not disadvantaged.
In fact, in some areas, some researchers have shown that children with same-sex attracted parents are doing a little bit better, particularly in areas such as parent-child relationships.
But generally, these studies only look at lesbian parents. So paediatrician Dr. Simon Crouch is running a study that involves the whole range of so-called rainbow families. For the first time, his Australian study of child health in same-sex families is investigating the complete physical, mental and social well-being of children.
Also, our study is looking as though it's going to be by far the largest study of its kind anywhere in the world. Generally speaking, many of these studies have been hampered by very small sample sizes, somewhere between 50 and 100 children in most of the studies. We already have information on around 500 children, so significantly more children in our study. For particularly gay male parents, particularly raising children from birth, it's quite a recent occurrence within society. Really, it's only been going on since the 2000s or so we're only really now having children of an age where we can start asking these questions about them.
This was exactly the point made by a young filmmaker on national TV last year.
And everyone seems to have an opinion about our families, like you, for example, Barnaby. But it doesn't seem that anyone is actually asking the kids what they feel. Like we're proof, right, of our parents', successful relationships. My mums have been together for 27 years, and why is their relationship worth less than anyone else's?
24-year-old Maya Newell grew up in the inner west of Sydney.
I probably had about half of my class who were pretty jealous of the fact that I had two mums and they only had one. But, that's not everyone's experience.
She's making a documentary called Gaby Baby.
Working on this film has meant that I've got to speak to probably 40, 50 kids from all around Australia, older and younger.
That gorgeous thing about gay parents talking everything through and really negotiating.
Families that I depict on the screen, they're not going to be perfect. No family is perfect. But their imperfections are not because they're children raised in same-sex families. I think that longitudinal research is really important. I don't think you're going to come up with, anything about how we're dysfunctional or anything, but I think it's good to study things that you don't know about.
So if we find that children with same-sex parents aren't doing very well, which is a possibility, then we need to find ways to support these children, to support these families, and make sure that society is supporting of rainbow families in general.
This research is often criticised because these studies don't use random, population-based sampling designs, which are the gold standard of large-scale social science. Instead, they use what's called convenience sampling, where participants are recruited using emails, events and personal contacts.
And the reason why we have to do that is we are in a situation in Australia where sexual orientation is not included on any population health surveys for political reasons, partly from very strong lobbying from people who don't think it should be included.
Even if a well-designed, long-term scientific study shows no difference between children of heterosexual and same-sex parents, would that change Jim Wallace's opinion?
Well, it wouldn't change my view on marriage, because marriage is about a biological truth, We have a stolen generation. We've learnt from the experience of the stolen generation that you should not break the biological identity of a child. And I'm saying that in the same way, same-sex marriage breaks the biological identity of a child.
On a practical level, that's just crazy, right? The stolen generation were kids who had families who were taken away. We have a daughter who knows her family. There's nothing missing in her life. She knows us and she's not going anywhere. We've not taken her away from anyone.
Next year anyway.
In our families, you can't have kids by accident, right? So we are the result of careful planning, of long deliberation, of lots of love, and that means that our parents really want us. It means that we are loved so much because they had to go on such a journey and fight so hard to have us. And, I think that's a pretty good way to start life.